Welcome to a new lesson. In this lesson, we'll be discussing negative exponents and reciprocals. So let's take a look at the yellow box and we'll talk about the powers with negative exponents. I'm going to explain you this a little bit complicated and a little bit convoluted equation. So x to the power of negative n is equivalent as 1 over x to the power of n, meaning as follows. If we have 3 to the power of negative 2, it is the same thing as having 1 over 3 to the power of positive 2. It's positive reciprocal. In other words, if you have 1 over, let's say 4 to the power of negative 3, it is the same thing as having 4 to the reciprocal of its positive power. Notice that the difference between the negative and the positive is its reciprocal. So the negative and its positive, it's reciprocal. So whenever we have a negative in the exponent, it is its reciprocal power. So let's use this information to do a couple examples. In this case, we are going to evaluate each power without the calculator, at least for the first two cases. So we have 3 to the power of negative 2. Remember that if we have a negative exponent, we have to find its positive power reciprocal. And in this case, it is 1 over 9. How about B? The negative 3/4 to the power of negative 3. Now, it is the negative exponent that creates a reciprocal in this case. So the result is that everything is going to be flipped upside down. It's going to be 4/3 negative times 3. And I want to show you how can this work. You see, whenever we have an exponent outside the bracket, we have to multiply this with the exponent inside the bracket, each and every exponent. Well, there is no exponent present, so therefore there is an exponent of 1. Therefore, we have negative 3 to the power of negative 3, 4 to the power of negative 3. How are we getting this negative 3? It's because 1 times negative 3. Then we still have that negative looming. 4 to the power of negative 3 becomes 4 positive to the power of 3. Negative exponent becomes its positive reciprocal. And the 3 now becomes positive reciprocal 3 to the power of 3. Which it's exactly the same thing as we see on top, except for the bracket. We could simplify this by having in top 4 to the power of 3 is 64, don't forget the minus, and 3 to the power of 3 is 9. And this is our simplified answer. Part C, unfortunately there is no quick way to do this question. So we're just going to use the calculator. This is how we're going to use the calculator. We're going to press 0.3, the hat for the power, and then you have to use a specific button on your calculator to press the negative button. There are 2 buttons that will have negative on it, but only one of them is negative. The other one is a positive. So make sure to press the right button, which has these little parentheses or brackets, and then press 4. this button on your calculator, TI-83 calculator, is located next to the, actually below the 3 button, right next to the enter button. And we'll get the answer of 123.46. Let's take a look at a different example. In this example, we'll be evaluating powers without using a calculator. Now, notice, not only do we have a negative exponent, but also we have fractions in the exponent. Okay, let's just jump in. So we have a to the power of negative 2 thirds. The first thing we'll do is we are going to be changing this exponent into a radical form. So we know that the 3 will tell us that it's going to be the index of 3. The 2 will tell us that we have to square it. So the 2 tells us that we have to square it. And the 8 tells us that this is our radicand. Now, the last thing we have to watch for is the negative sign. The negative sign means it's going to be reciprocal, or 1 over. So here is a simplified version for us to be able to calculate our answers. So we could simplify it. We'll do the bracket first. What's inside the bracket? Cube root of 8 is just 2, because 2 times 2 is 8, and the cube root tells us that we're looking for a group of 2, and we take one of them out, and that's 2. And now we have, don't forget the square. So again, we're going to use the exponent first. So 2 to the power of 2 is a quarter, or a 4, 1 over 4. And here's your answer. Now let's take a look at part B. Now we're going to do the same thing as before. We identified that 2 is the index. We're going to change the entire fraction into a radical form. So now the index is 2. And since there's numerator and denominator, we are going to be splitting them into the top and the bottom. So that's the 2. The 3 tells us that each of these will have a power of 3. Each of the numerator and will have a power of 3. And the negative means that they will be reciprocal. So that means if 9 was on top, 9 will be now on the bottom. And since 16 was on the bottom, on the denominator, now it will be on the top. And now we can simplify it. Square root of 16 is 4. Now we still have the power of 3. Square root of 9 is 3. And don't forget that we still have that power of 3. So the top will be 64, and the bottom will be 27. And there's no common factors with 64 and 27, so we are finished with the question. And 64 over 27 is our answer. Let's take a look at some application questions. Paleontologists use measurements from fossilized dinosaurs' tracks and the formula V equals 0.155 s to the power of 5 thirds times f to the power of negative 7/6 to estimate the speed at which the dinosaur traveled. In the formula, V is the speed in meters per second. S is the distance between successive footprints of the same foot. And F is the foot length in meters. Use the measurements in a diagram to estimate the speed of this dinosaur. So let's take a look at the corner picture. We know that 0.25 meters is the value of our F, is the foot length, while the distance of 1 meter is the distance of the steps. the successive steps. So let's take those values and put it into our velocity formula. 0.155, and s is 1 to the power of 5/3. I like to use brackets because then it shows me and separates and tells me which operation I should do first. And f is 0.25 to the power of -7/6. In this example, it is probably best to use a calculator since we are using decimal values. And this is how you should type this into your calculator. So calculator. So type in 0.155, and you could use bracket or multiplication. I'll use bracket. 1 hat, and I start another bracket, 5 divided by 3, and close bracket. Then start another bracket or multiplication, 0.25, do a little hat, and in this case, make sure that you don't forget the negative sign. Make sure you press a bracket, and then you're going to have this button that has a bracket and a minus sign. It's right below the 3 button, and next to, it's to the left of the enter button. And 7 divided by 6, close bracket, and your answer will be 0.781 meters per second. It's approximation. So your dinosaur was traveling at 0.781 meters per second.